Chapter 70 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Daisy 55. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. Chapter 70. Compelled to Volunteer. There had been much trouble in our own home during the previous autumn, while yet I was in London, for certain noted fugitives from the army of King Monmouth, which he himself had deserted in a low and curious manner, having failed to obtain free shipment from the coast near Watersmouth, had returned into the wilds of Exmoor, trusting to lurk and be comforted among the common people. Neither were they disappointed for certain at the time, nor in the end was their disappointment caused by fault on our part. Major Wade was one of them, an active and well-meaning man, but prone to fail in courage, upon lasting trial, although in a moment ready. Squire John Witchhazel, not the Baron, and Parson Powell, note, not our Parson Bowden, nor any more a friend of his. Our Parson Bowden never had naught whatever to do with it, and never smoked a pipe with Parson Powell after it. J.R. caught him 2 or 3 months before my return, in Farley farmhouse near Bredon. He had been up at our house several times, and Lizzie thought a great deal of him. And well I know that if at all that time I had been in their neighbourhood, he should not have been taken so easily. John Birch, the farmer who had sheltered him, was so fearful of punishment that he hanged himself in a few days' time, and even before he was apprehended. But nothing was done to Gracie Howell, of Bridgeborough, who had been Wade's greatest comforter. Neither was anything done to us, although Eliza had added greatly to mother's alarm and danger by falling upon Rector Powell, and most soundly rating him for his meanness, and his cruelty and cowardice, as she called it, in setting men with firearms upon a poor helpless fugitive, and robbing all our neighbourhood of its fame for hospitality. However, by means of Sergeant Boxham and his good report to us, as well as by virtue of Wade's confession, which proved of use to the government, my mother escaped all penalties. It is likely enough that good folk will think it hard upon our neighbourhood to be threatened, and sometimes heavily punished, for kindness and humanity, and yet to be left to help ourselves against tyranny and base rapine. And now at last our gorge was risen, and our hearts in tumult. We have bore our troubles long, as a wise and wholesome chastisement, quite content to have some few things of our own unmeddled with. But what could a man dare to call his own, or what right could he have to wish for it, while he left his wife and children at the pleasure of any stranger? The people came flocking all around me, at the blacksmith's forge, in the Bredon's alehouse, and I could scarcely come out of church, but they got me among the tombstones. They all agreed that I was bound to take the command and management. I bade them to go to the magistrates, but they said they had been too often. Then I told them that I had no wits for ordering of an armament, although I could find fault enough with one which had not succeeded. But they would hearken to none of this. All they said was, "Try to lead us, and we will try not to run away." This seemed to me to be common sense and good stuff, instead of mere bragging. Moreover, I myself was moved by the bitter wrongs of Margery, having known her at the Sunday school, ere ever I went to Tiverton, and having in those days serious thoughts of making her my sweetheart, although she was 3 years my elder. But now I felt this difficulty. The Doones had behaved very well to our farm, and to mother, and all of us, while I was away in London. Therefore it would not be shabby and mean for me to attack them now. Yet being pressed still harder and harder, as day by day the excitement grew, with more and more talking over it, and no one else coming forward to undertake the business, I agreed at last to this, that if the Doones, upon fair challenge, would not endeavour to make amends by giving up Mistress Margery, as well as the man who had slain the baby, then I would lead the expedition and do my best to subdue them. All our men were content with this, being thoroughly well assured from experience that the haughty robbers would only shoot any man who durst approach them with such proposal. And then arose a difficult question. Who was to take the risk of making overtures so unpleasant? I waited for the rest to offer, and as none was ready, the burden fell on me, and seemed to be of my own inviting. Hence I undertook the task, sooner than reason about it, for to give the cause of everything is worse than to go through with it. It may have been 3 of the afternoon, when leaving my witnesses behind, for they prefer the background, I appeared without Lizzie's white handkerchief upon a kidney bean stick at the entrance to the robbers' dwelling, scarcely knowing what might come of it. I had taken the wise precaution of fastening a Bible over my heart, and another across my spinal column, in case of having to run away, with rude men shooting at me. For my mother said that the word of God would stop a 2-inch bullet, with 3 ounces of powder behind it. Now I took no weapons, save those of the Spirit, for fear of being misunderstood. But I could not bring myself to think that any of honourable birth would take advantage of an unarmed man coming in guise of peace to them. And this conclusion of mine held good, at least for a certain length of time, inasmuch as 2 decent Doones appeared, and hearing of my purpose, offered, without violence, to go and fetch the captain, if I would stop where I was, and not being to spy about anything. To this of course I agreed at once, for I wanted no more spying, because I had thoroughly knowledge of all ins and outs already. Therefore I stood waiting steadily, with one hand in my pocket feeling a sample of corn for market, and the other against the rock, while I wondered to see if it so brown already. Those men came back in a little while, with a sharp short message that Captain Carver would come out and speak to me by and by, when his pipe was finished. Accordingly I waited long, and we talked about the signs of bloom for the coming apple season, and the rain that had fallen last Wednesday night, and the principal dearth of Devonshire, that it will not grow many cowslips, which we were quite agreed to be the prettiest of spring flowers. And all the time I was wondering how many black and deadly deeds these 2 young innocent youths had committed, ever since last Christmas. At length a heavy and haughty step sounded along the stone roof of the way, and then the great Carver Doone drew up, and looked at me rather scornfully, not with any spoken scorn, nor flash of strong contumely, but with that air of thinking little, and praying not to be troubled, which always vexes a man who feels that he ought not to be despised so, and yet knows not how to help it. "What is it you want, young man?" he asked, as if he had never seen me before. In spite of that strong loathing which I always felt at sight of him, I commanded my temper moderately, and told him that I was come for his good, and that of his worshipful company, far more than my own. That a general feeling of indignation had arisen among us at the recent behaviour of certain young men, for which he might not be answerable, and for which he would not condemn him, without knowing the rights of the question. But I begged him clearly to understand that a vile and inhuman wrong had been done, and such as we could not put up with it, but that if he would make what amends he could by restoring the poor woman, and giving up that odious brute who had slain the harmless infant, we would take no further motion, and things should go on as usual. As I put this in the fewest words that would meet my purpose, I was grieved to see a disdainful smile spread on his sallow countenance. Then he made me a bow of mock courtesy, and replied as follows: "Sir John, your new honours have turned your poor head, as might have been expected. We are not in the habit of deserting anything that